Happy Laetare Sunday, which means Rejoice Sunday. What is it that we actually rejoice? Is it because there's like 2 feet of snow predicted? That's not it. It's because salvation is nearly at hand. We rejoice in the fact that soon we will be with Jesus on the journey to Calvary, which will then lead to the empty tomb. We rejoice in all that the Lord has done already in our Lenten journey to convert our hearts, to deepen our relationship with Him, all the efforts to become more intentional disciples. In these last 3 weeks, or in these last 3 weeks of Lent, we are praying with some important people in the Scriptures. Last week was the Samaritan woman. This week is the man born blind. And next week, spoiler alert, will be Lazarus. Each of whom we are called to identify with. The aspects of their life are meant to teach us something about our spiritual life, meant to teach us about what intentional discipleship is. So this man born blind, this encounter with him begins with a question that I would bet all of us have asked at least once in our life, if not more. Why? Why did this happen? The disciples ask, okay, who's the one who sinned here? Was it him or his parents? Because someone must have done something wrong that he was born blind. And what's Jesus' answer? Neither. This is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. How often when we're confused or we suffer or something bad happens or we think the Lord's far away, whatever the scenario, we say, why? What did I do to deserve this? What did this person do to deserve that? And sometimes, nothing. It's simply an opportunity, and maybe a difficult one, but an opportunity for the Lord to work through us and to show His power and His goodness through our suffering. The man didn't become blind, he was born blind. And what's symbolic in that, anytime that we come across blindness in the Scriptures, we are meant to recognize our own spiritual blindness that comes from our sin. But he was born blind, so that points to us, our original sin, and how we are in need of a Savior. We are in need of He, the Lord, who is the light of the world, who illumines the darkness, who heals blindness, and allows us to see clearly. But the first step of that is to recognize that we're blind in the first place. How does our blindness affect our trust in the Lord and His church? How does it affect our curiosity to know the Lord more? How does it affect our spiritual openness to the Lord, to what the Lord wants to give? And how does it affect who and what we seek in life? What are the prejudices, the poor dispositions, or the vices that keep us from seeing clearly? So we come to this 4th week of Lent, Laetare Sunday. We now come to the threshold of spiritual seeking, where things start to get a bit more serious for the one who is trying to become an intentional disciple. In this threshold or stage, a person moves from being passive to actively seeking to know God who is calling him or her. At this stage, the seeker is engaged in a spiritual quest as to whether or not he or she can commit to Jesus Christ and His church. We move from being passive to actively seeking. We take a concrete step to go deeper, to know more, to be even just a bit more intimate. It's a step or a stage that requires trust and vulnerability. Because we're not so much on the sidelines anymore. We're not just looking, we're not at the surface anymore. We've gone a bit deeper, and sometimes that can be a bit scary, yeah. And like last week with the Samaritan woman, it's the same this week with the blind man. We can see this process of unknown to initial trust to curiosity, to seeking, and eventually to a profession of faith in the Lord. The entirety of this journey of intentional discipleship is seen in the Samaritan woman and in the man born blind. Moving towards intentional discipleship requires us to discern where we're blind so that we can then actively seek to know God more and to understand how He's calling us. The man born blind in this story is searching for God. He asks serious spiritual questions. He's open to change. He embraces what he doesn't know. And he's personally engaged in discovering who Jesus is. It's kind of, excuse me, funny where at one point, how many times did he have to say, listen, I had clay in my eyes, I washed, now I can see. Over and over again. And finally he's like, what more do you want to hear? I don't know how this happened. All I know is what he did for me. And then he encountered Jesus. And we come to what I would say is the pinnacle of the gospel, a perfect example of what it is, what it means to seek. Right? There's all this back and forth about who Jesus is. Is he a good guy or not? A sinner? I don't know how this all works. We can relate to that in our faith life, right? Things happen we don't understand. We don't exactly know who Jesus is at different times. So then Jesus asks the question, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the blind man responds with the question, who is he, sir, that I may believe? Who is he, sir, that I may believe? And of course, Jesus says, me. You're looking at him. The man says, I do believe. But here's what I really want to impress upon all of us this week. Have you ever asked the question, who Jesus is to you? Or have you ever just asked Jesus himself, who are you? Maybe that seems a bit strange, especially for us who have been cradle Catholics or grown up Christian our whole lives, and we hear the things, okay, Jesus is the Messiah, he's the Son of God, he's the Redeemer. We can answer all of that. But in this personal, one-on-one relationship, to ask that very deep and beautiful question, who is he? Is he someone for you that is kind of far away in the distance? Can't really see him all too well, maybe a bit blurred. Is he someone that maybe you're a bit fearful of because you know what he might ask of you might be tough? There might be a sin, a habit, a disposition that you know he's going to ask you to leave behind, and that's a little too difficult. So I'm going to, you're a good guy, Jesus, but I'm going to keep you just a little farther away. Or is he someone that you know intimately? That's your best friend, your brother, whatever word you might want to use. As we come to the pinnacle of Easter and our study on intentional discipleship, moving through these thresholds, it's very important to ask this question, who is Jesus? And don't just go for the surface obvious answer, but ask it deep in your heart. Think back to when I was in the seminary, and we'd have formation sessions and all sorts of talks on the priesthood and different retreats, and there was any number of moments where it was very clear that like to move on to the next year, or as ordination approached, or as we were taught about just the depths of what it takes to be a good priest, it was like, that's a little scary. And then Jesus I don't know if I want to get too close because I don't know if I can accept what's truly called. There is those moments of fear. Not that I didn't like Jesus, of course, but it's just natural. And this Lenten journey, for me, in my prayer, there's been a very clear theme that fits so well with intentional discipleship, and that's trust. The Lord's been asking me, can you trust me even just a little bit more? Whether it's in the shepherding of the parish, the administrative side, the simple daily things. And that's so perfect because with this study and reflection on intentional discipleship, we're never going to get there if we don't build on the initial trust of that first threshold and start to become more vulnerable, more trusting in the Lord, as we've seen happen with the Samaritan woman and the man born blind. Remember the definition of an intentional disciple. It is one who has made the decision to follow Jesus, subordinating one's will, desire, loves, and wants to that of the will of God. So the question for us on this wonderful Laetare Sunday: who is Jesus to us, so that we too, like the blind man, may come to believe?